Welcome to Britain, a developing country. A series where we visit the movers and shakers in the property development industry to find out what is happening across the UK. Stephen Galpin, one of our resident property experts, is one of the UK's leading property consultants and also a freeman of the City of London.
In this programme we meet Nicolas Kent, a renowned theatrical, radio and TV director whose work over 50 years has been influential and at times also controversial. Nicolas has directed productions in over 100 theatres around the world, including the West End and New York, as well as for companies in England who include the National Theatre, the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Young Vic. Nicolas is probably best known for the political work he did at Tricycle Theatre, where the verbatim plays he directed became known as the Tricycle Tribunal plays and included The Colour of Justice and Nuremberg. In 2017, he edited and directed his own play, All the President's Men, in a co-production between the Public Theatre in New York and the National Theatre in London for a special staged reading in the West End and on Broadway. Nicolas has recently been instrumental in the creation of a unique registered charity, the Visitors Art Foundation, an initiative designed to support London's cultural and arts economy. London is unusual among world-leading cities in not levying a tourist tax on hotel visitors. Hotels in New York, Paris, Berlin, Rome, San Francisco, and in many other world cities have previously introduced hotel bed taxes, the proceeds of which go in part or in full towards the support of the entertainment and cultural organisations in those cities. Organisations that are in turn responsible for helping to attract tourism. London does not, although overseas tourists comprise a significant proportion of museum and gallery visitors. 58% of visitors to the British Museum, for example, are from overseas, as are 61% of the National Gallery's visitors. 50% of visitors to Tate, 48% of visitors to the Natural History Museum, 27% of the Science Museum's visitors, and some 38% of non-reading room visitors to the British Library. The Visitors Art Foundation is therefore an initiative directly supportive of the government's desire to maintain the flow of ideas and creative talent through the capital, to support the cultural economy, and to maintain and build London's standing as a global cultural leader. Stephen met up with Nicolas Kent to find out where the idea for the Visitor Art Foundation came from and to investigate the concept more fully.
Joining us today on the programme is Nick Kent, who along with his partner Charles Rifkind have created the Visitors Arts Foundation. Nick, please tell us a little bit about your foundation and what it hopes to achieve, and whose initiative was it?
Well, I met Charles at a wedding some time ago. We were both guests, and he was just come back from the United States, and he was very cross about the amount of money he'd been charged to go to the Museum of Modern Art. And when in London, as a trustee, as he was at that time, of the Friends of the Tate Gallery, people were getting in for free. And so he said, how do we rectify this? How do we get overseas tourists to use our arts facilities but contribute towards them?
Right. Nick, is this going to be a London-wide exercise, or is it going to be a national operation?
It's a London-wide exercise at the moment, although Edinburgh, I believe, are discussing it and thinking about it, and other cities like Birmingham and Manchester are thinking about it.
There is no question that the hotel industry in London is booming. We see new hotels almost daily springing up, and your idea is simply to charge a overnight fee of, I think, around £2.50 to generate funds for the arts, for the social good. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly it. There are 150,000 beds, hotel beds in London, and 41 million visitors have overnight stays in London. And at the moment they can visit about 140 institutions like the British Museum, the Imperial War Museum, the Science Museum, the Natural History Museum or the National Gallery for nothing. Whereas in other cities, they're charged to visit those sorts of institutions. And many other cities, world cities like London, have taxes for visitors as well as them being charged.
I see. Now, is your idea to have this charge across the board, or is there a level at which it sort of kicks in?
No, it would be across the board. I mean, if we might exclude hotels that are charging less than 50, but we would like to extend it to cruise ships and to Airbnb as well in due course. But to begin with, it would either be about £2.50 a night or 1%.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to think mentally. At £2.50 a night, a fortnight stay in London, it's going to add approximately £35 to the stay. How would you charge that? How would it physically be charged?
Well, we would add it to the bill and per night for each night, and so it would just be added. At the moment, it can be optionally added, and we would like to add it so that you opt out. But under current legislation, it seems we can only get it so you opt in. But ideally, it would be a tax that the mayor would charge. He doesn't have those devolved powers yet, but hopefully when we've got through Brexit, the government will legislate to devolve wider powers to London and other cities.
That's assuming we do get through Brexit.
Yes,
of course.
exactly.
Right. Just coming back to this charging again, I've done a little bit of research, obviously, in preparation for this programme. If I talk to hoteliers, they say, oh, I'm not sure. This is another exercise for us in collecting tax. We'll have to allocate the money to a specific part of our accounting. We'll then have to understand how we pass it on to the trust. How would that physically work?
It could be very easy. You could just add, at the moment hotels charge 20% VAT. You could make it 21%. And the 1% could be passed through to an organisation like the Visitors Arts Foundation, hopefully us, and it could then provide added support to Free Entry London, to parks, libraries and museums and galleries that don't charge for entry. And then it could give them a form of additionality. We could, through this money, provide longer opening hours. We could provide more staff, curators. We could provide artists with studio space. We could provide bursaries, all sorts of things to keep London's place as the cultural capital of the world.
London is the world's capital of culture. Its museums, galleries, parks, libraries, concert halls and theatres cumulatively constitute perhaps the greatest concentration of artistic and creative endeavour anywhere, ever. Uniquely among global cities, access to much of this culture is free to locals and visitors alike. From the British Museum to the Tate Gallery, from the National Gallery and Science Museum through to lesser-known delights such as Hogarth House, Hendricks and Handel House. Free admission means that the majority of our museums, galleries and libraries, and there are over 135 of them, are open and accessible to everybody without exception or distinction. They represent one of the principal reasons why London enjoys the scale of tourism that it does. After all, 45% of overseas visitors state that the primary reason for visiting the capital is the city's considerable offering of museums, galleries and exhibitions. The combination of free entry and the absence of any tourist tax is unique, and perhaps even could be counterproductive to stimulating the further growth of tourism in the capital. The Visitors Art Foundation believes that it's therefore appropriate for a modest tax to be levied on hotel guests, either all visitors or all from overseas. The proceeds of this tax would go towards ensuring that the institutions that are at the heart of London's rich and free artistic and cultural life remain vibrant and can continue to contribute to the capital's social, economic and cultural vitality. Many believe that the proceeds of a new tourist tax should go towards ensuring that our free museums and libraries are investing in and supporting working artists. The scientists, the writers, craftspeople and curators, perhaps by developing exemplary creative workspaces, which will support new visitor destination areas. Also by supporting cultural initiatives which would encourage Londoners and visitors to discover and enjoy free access to cultural experiences beyond the centre of the city, either directly under the auspices of or in collaboration with free entry institutions. Stephen took the opportunity of meeting with Nicolas to ask if he thought this idea might be counterproductive by encouraging the government to reduce access to existing or new grants.
Right, now an obvious question springs up here. What about the government temptation to say, lovely, thank you very much for collecting this money, that means we can reduce our involvement in grants and special bursaries to these kind of artistic operations?
Well, it's very important that the grants are maintained for the wider population, obviously, and for British people to have access to museums, galleries, libraries and parks. But we would provide additionality exactly in the same way as the lottery currently does. It gives additionality to sport and the arts, and this would do it to free entry institutions through the Visitors Arts Foundation.
Okay. Now, as a tourist, at what point would I be asked to pay this tax? Would it be at the point that I make my reservation with my travel agent in Tokyo or Milan or wherever I am? Or would it be at the point of billing in the hotel?
It would hopefully be at the point you make your reservation.
Right. And how would you get that across to the various, I'm thinking particularly online booking sites? Are they going to be willing to take this on as an extra tick box?
Well, this is the mayor has to persuade the hotels to do this, and then if the hotels do it, obviously it can go wider than that.
So essentially, you're looking to have really a compulsory scheme,
yes,
sanctioned by
yes,
the mayor.
But
now,
we need it to start on a voluntary basis, sanctioned by the mayor.
Okay. How would you change that from voluntary to compulsory? What would
Well,
trigger
the laws
that change?
don't yet exist to change it to
Right.
compulsory because the mayor doesn't have those
Doesn't
tax
have the
raising
power.
powers.
After the break, we're going to find out what level of support the Visitors Art Foundation has received already, and if the Mayor of London's office has been open to the concept. Before the break, we looked at the acceptance of a tourism or hotel tax in many of the world's leading cities, and the recent move in London to create the Visitors Arts Foundation, intended as a means of creating new funds to help protect and to develop London as a thriving cultural and arts centre. There are already over 137,000 hotel beds available in London, and thousands more due for completion over the next 2 years. Average London hotel occupancy is currently about 82% and is growing. That means that there are about 41 million hotel bed nights per year. Of these, overseas visitors account for 82% of bed nights spent in London. A tax of just £2.50 per room per night would result in proceeds of about 102 million per annum. And it's thought by many that cruise ships could also be included in the scheme, increasing the revenues produced by even more. The proceeds from a charge on bed nights would therefore generate significant sums, even if it was introduced initially on just a voluntary basis.
You've obviously talked about making this a compulsory charge. Have you talked to Sadiq Khan about this, our latest mayor?
Yes, the latest mayor is working on it.
And is he as keen as Boris was?
Yes, but he doesn't have the same. He has the same problem that Boris had. There's no statutory instrument that can enable him to do it.
Okay, so tell us about some of the venues that you would support and how you would define what they would get in terms of a grant or a bursary.
Well, at the moment, for instance, 58% of the visitors to the British Museum are coming from overseas. About the same, 60% to the National Gallery. So money would go to large and small institutions There are local museums. There's even a sewing machine museum. There's all sorts of different museums, the Cinema Museum in Kennington, all sorts of different museums throughout London in the outer boroughs as well as the inner boroughs that offer free entry. We would ask them to apply for money to the Visitors Arts Foundation. We'd have a grant giving committee, and we would be able through this tax to pass out £100 million a year.
Right, and out of the proceeds that you receive from the hotel groups, assuming they're signed up or it's a compulsory scheme, what sort of percentage do you think of your revenue would actually end up with the venues?
I would think 98%.
98%.
Yeah.
That's very high.
We would hardly have any. We would keep our administration process to absolute minimum.
I'm just the reason I asked the question. I mean, I'm just thinking today, holding on to people's money, especially in terms of a charitable trust.
Yeah.
Your regulations are quite strong. Your distribution process is under scrutiny all the time. Do you really think you can do that for 2%?
I think we could easily run it for £2 million, which would be a lot of money, and we might even save some on that. I can't see why we wouldn't do that. And we'd be passing out £98 million to those institutions. We'd keep it lean, and we'd keep it hungry and able to gather in as much money as possible and pass it. We wouldn't have to do the administration. Of course, the money would come to us, and then we would move it out.
Of course, the collection and distribution of the funds generated is critical. To help assess and develop this, the Visitors Art Foundation has been running a voluntary scheme in 2 hotels, the St Martin's Lane and the Sanderson, to establish the technical viability of a voluntary scheme. Administering the collection and distribution of funds from a compulsory room levy is thought by many to be much easier and would ensure the collection of significant funds each year. What's more, surveys conducted have shown that there is minimal resistance by consumers to the idea of a compulsory levy.
Putting myself back in the tourist spot, let's say I'm not from abroad, let's say I'm from Manchester or somewhere else and I'm coming down to London and I'm staying in a hotel. I think part of my argument against the scheme would be, well, I'm already paying. I'm paying taxes, I'm paying local authority, council tax, this sort of thing. I can understand why overseas visitors might want to contribute to free entry. Why would I?
Well, I think there is a slight problem about this. Obviously, there is money, as you correctly say, going through tax to these institutions. But you would be benefiting artists and you'd make the institutions better. So we would hope people would be willing to make those donations. At the moment, if you go to the theatre, you're almost always asked in subsidised theatre to make a donation as well as your tickets. I don't think £2.50 is an enormous amount of money per night. And if you're coming as a tourist, to see the benefit you're getting from the free entry you get in a tangible way, because you will visit those places as you're coming as a tourist, and hopefully you will help them in some way.
Okay, well, you used an expression there, seeing the benefit. Either as an overseas tourist or somebody from this country, how do I see where my money's going? Will I see a schedule? Will there be literature readily available in the hotels to show who's supporting it, who isn't, or if it's a compulsory scheme, where this money is going and who's benefiting?
Yes, it's very important that we collaborate with the hotels. For instance, we might quite often have evening opening times, especially for tourists, saying all participating hotels, guests can go to a special evening opening time. Those sorts of things. And we will obviously prominently produce a magazine or something once a quarter, which will be available in hotels, saying what this money is being used for, and trying, hopefully, to get people enthused about the scheme so they might contribute even more towards it.
Okay, that's very good. Just finally, I want to ask, where you have this donation to the various venues, are hotel staff or those associated with the scheme going to get any kind of benefit or preferential treatment? Are in fact the visitors going to get any preferential treatment because they've contributed?
Yes, I think.
Are there any concessionary rates, I suppose?
Yes, well, it's difficult to do concessionary rates on free entry institutions except when they have special exhibitions. And obviously we might say, encourage hotels to offer the visitors a chance in collaboration, say, with the British Museum, if there's a special exhibition, to have a concessionary rate. What we also want to do, and are very conscious of, is have 1 or 2 evenings to museums that maybe are less well known to hotel staff, and give them a free evening in that, maybe with some drinks in that museum, so that they can say to people, hey, there's a wonderful museum a little further out of town. Why don't you try that museum, like the Horniman or something like that? Why don't you venture out there? So we would widen the idea of museum going for tourists away from central London.
While many visitors concentrate their visits to galleries and museums in central London, there are already scores of attractions outside of the city centre, and this number is growing year on year.
Okay, well, Nick, you'll appreciate the content of this programme really has been about encouraging social conscience, if you like,
yes,
for developers. We've already looked at residential. We've now looked today at the hotel industry, which is, as I said, really booming. I have to say, I think your scheme's a splendid idea. You should be congratulated. I hope Charles and yourself are successful with this foundation, and I do hope the London Mayor soon gets the powers to be able to give you the authority to get.
The Visitors Art Foundation is here, and it seems it's here to stay. With the potential to significantly and positively affect the development, sustainability, and indeed the ability of London's cultural and artistic community to continue to help attract visitors from all over the world. Its goal is simple: to help develop Britain by ensuring that what is arguably the most historic, cultural centre of the world continues to be exactly that: London.